Let me start by talking about the big Ten Commandments ruling that came down this week. Now, I say this as I think just yesterday, Greg Abbott in Texas signed a bill that would require every classroom in the state of Texas to put the Ten Commandments up. Whether it's going to stay that way remains to be seen. I've already heard from church-state separation groups that they plan to file a lawsuit pretty quickly, so that you probably are going to see that coming down in the next day or two. But that's not the thing I wanted to talk about. The thing I wanted to talk about is what an appellate court said about an identical law in Louisiana. So I'm going to walk you through what this case is all about and what this appellate court said, because this is one of the biggest decisions we've seen in a while come down about these Ten Commandments laws. So let me back up and tell you what this law is about, and then we'll go from there. Basically, earlier, was it last year? Last year in Louisiana, they passed this bill during the 2024 regular session. It's a bill to put the Ten Commandments in public schools. And you could see right over here, line 18, they tell you exactly which things they want to put up in the classroom. Like every poster that goes up has to have these words on it. I don't need to read them to you. It's the Ten Commandments, even though if you count the list they actually have there, it's more than 10 thou shalt nots. It's kind of weird, but okay. But they put up, that's what they wanted in this bill. It was sponsored by a Republican representative, Dodie Horton. She said that the Ten Commandments had to be placed on a poster or framed document that's like 11 by 14 inches. And the text of the commandments has to be front and center in a large font. Yeah. We've seen this a lot. The House bill that she sponsored actually said schools had to pay for the posters themselves, whether through their own funds or through donated funds, but they could also accept donations. It never actually said what the penalty would be for any school that did not want to participate in that Christian charade. Now, obviously, why are they doing this? We know the reason they're doing this. It's to inject Christianity into the public schools. That's what this is always about. Now, because they are conservative Christians, they are also liars. So they don't say that out loud. They tell you it's about the founding of our country and we need to respect those foundations. But obviously, this is about promoting Christianity. Let me take just a second to explain why this is dumb for all sorts of reasons beyond the legal side of this. The same people, and I know I've said this before, but it's worth saying again, the same people who don't want high school students or younger learning about sex, systemic racism, LGBTQ people, they have very specific things they want you to know about what you can or cannot do with your neighbor's maidservants, right? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, too. Like, it's always a meaningless gesture because their argument is that this is the sort of thing that could instill morality in kids. This is the sort of thing that's going to stop school shooters. Not taking away guns and access to guns, but making sure a potential shooter sees the words "thou shalt not kill" as if that's going to make them rethink whatever it is they were going to do. It would be nice if those kids could see mental health professionals, but in Louisiana, like other states, they're trying to get Christian chaplains in public schools instead of actual experts. And obviously, if you look at any version of the Ten Commandments these people want to put up, the first several commandments have nothing to do with morality. It's ridiculous religious shit like, don't worship false gods, don't worship graven images, don't take God's name in vain, you got to keep the Sabbath day holy. There is no secular purpose for any of those commandments. Plenty of the other ones are also not illegal. You know what? If you don't want to honor thy parents, maybe you have a good reason not to. So, and the other thing to point out is that public school teachers were not asking for this. This is the government micromanaging public education in a way that doesn't help anybody, but it riles up their own base who doesn't care about anything but this sort of thing. So this bill passed in the Louisiana House. It made it to the Louisiana Senate, and they were like, oh no, this is totally illegal. We need to make some fixes to this. So they did make a few changes to the bill that they thought could help them avoid a lawsuit. One is that they decided, they decided that every poster needed to come with a disclaimer. And this is the disclaimer they wanted next to these posters. It says, look, this is historical, you guys. It's not about promoting Christianity. This is like a tradition we've had in the education system forever. And they list a few different books here. Like in the year 1688, the New England Primer became the first published American textbook, blah, 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 that was used in public schools to teach Americans to read and contained more than 40 questions about the Ten Commandments. Which also, if that was in 1688, who the hell cares? That has nothing to do with the foundation of this country. Like, they're just literally pulling anything they could find that has any connection to the Ten Commandments and saying, look, we found this thing from hundreds of years ago, therefore it's okay to push Christianity on kids now. So that was one thing they did. They tried to shove this disclaimer as if that would make it clear this is not about pushing religion on kids. Another change. The Senate's version of the bill said schools can have the option of putting up copies of the Mayflower Compact, the Declaration of Independence, and the Northwest Ordinance alongside the Ten Commandments. See, you guys, the Ten Commandments are just one of many ancient documents that inspired our legal system. Even though those other documents we're making you put up as an option all have references to God. And also, again, those are optional. You do not have to put up those other signs. So if the bill says the Christian list is mandatory, but the other historical documents are optional, that's still an illegal promotion of religion. So what the hell? It doesn't help. The Senate's version of the bill also said no public funds could be used for the displays. The only thing you're allowed to do is you can take donations for posters or donations of cash so you can buy posters. So they're trying to make it clear, see, no taxpayer funding used, so you can't say tax dollars are promoting religion. But the bottom line is that the schools would still be forced to put up the Ten Commandments. So nothing the Senate did was going to make this legal. I don't know what they were thinking. And actually, after this bill got signed, even the governor of Louisiana, Jeff Landry, said in a statement he couldn't wait to be sued over this. Like, he knew damn well what he was doing. And he knew church-state separation groups would be mad about it. And of course, he was right. They did get sued over this very quickly after the bill got signed. And to be, without getting into all the details, because I have made videos about this bill in the past, basically, what the lawsuit said is that no matter how you slice it, the Ten Commandments bill is illegal. It is a promotion of Christianity. So on that basis, it violates the First Amendment. So it's got to go. But even if you want to argue that this has nothing to do with church-state separation or the promotion of Christianity, if you want to argue the Ten Commandments has a tradition of being in the public schools, guess what? That is not true. The lawsuit, which, by the way, was filed by, who was it? The ACLU of Louisiana, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They represented a coalition of families. Some of them were non-religious, some were very religious, but all of them said, it is wrong for you to shove your religion when I'm trying to raise my kids a certain way. But they also pointed out, like, this is clearly about pushing religion. Do you know how we know that? Guess what? If you ask the sponsors of this bill why they want the Ten Commandments in schools, we have quotations they have said about how it's pushing religion. In fact, they quoted the law's primary sponsor, Dodie Horton, saying that the bill seeks to have a display of God's law in the classroom for children to see what he says is right and what he says is wrong. And another Republican, a co-author of this bill, said he supported the law and anyone who criticized it was waging an attack on Christianity. And he said it would provide a religious counterbalance to what he claimed was students' secular education. So in the process of defending this bill, Republicans were like, why are you going after my faith? And then Democrats are like, did you say your faith? Is that what this bill is about? And Republicans are like, no, it's about tradition. Ha ha ha. Fingers crossed, whatever. The lawsuit pointed out You know that the other posters that Louisiana schools could put up, the Mayflower Compact, all that stuff, there's no size requirement for those. Not only is it optional, they could be as tiny as you want to make them out to be so that the Ten Commandments are prioritized. Another sign that this is about elevating religion. They called out what the founding fathers said. In the bill itself, it actually quotes James Madison as saying, "We have staked the whole future of our new nation upon the capacity of each of ourselves to govern ourselves according to the moral principles of the Ten Commandments." Well, the lawsuit points out that James Madison never said that. It's a fake thing that is attributed to him, but Madison never said that. Now, Christian pseudo-historian David Barton lies about that, but Madison never said it. So, like, anything you are doing, the lawsuit says, anything these Republicans are doing to pretend this is tradition, this is about American history, is just BS. And so they just made that very, very clear. One of my favorite things about how Louisiana responded to the lawsuit is they said, you cannot sue us because, one, these posters have not gone up in the classrooms yet, so you have nothing to be offended about. And in a press conference, the Attorney General of Louisiana actually said, listen, my office, her name is Liz Morell, she said, my office has made some sample posters that include the Ten Commandments that you could put up in the classroom. And you guys, clearly, this is not elevating Christianity. And I want to show you, I've done this before. I don't care. I'm showing you again. This is one of the posters she wanted to put up here. She said, look, here's one of your people's favorite people, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, saying, since the beginning of time, the world has known 4 great documents. Great, because of all the benefits to humanity which came about as a result of their fine ideals and principles. And what does she have on this list? The 1689 English Bill of Rights, the Ten Commandments as stated in their bill, the Declaration of Independence right over here, and this one's the Magna Carta. And the thing is, this, the Attorney General is saying, would be legal because it includes the Ten Commandments, but it also includes these other optional documents. And like, this would be fine. So how could you possibly say this is a promotion of Christianity? It's clearly not. I just want to point out, Ruth Bader Ginsburg never said this thing up here in any of her Supreme Court filings. Where did that quotation come from? Well, I can trace it back for you because she published a book a couple years before her death in which she was talking about what she was like as a kid. And she shared in this memoir she wrote, she said, you know, when I was a kid in elementary school, grade 8, and her name was just Ruth Bader, she wrote an essay in 8th grade that began with these words. Sorry, let me bring that back here. That began with these words, promoting the Ten Commandments. The first was the Ten Commandments, which was given to Moses, ... Today, people of almost every religion respect and accept them as a code of ethics and a standard of behavior. Which, first of all, well written for an 8th grader, but 2, she had changed her jurisprudence by the time she got on the bench. This is not something Ruth Bader Ginsburg said in any of her writings later on in life. So if your best bet to say why the Ten Commandments can be legally put up in school is by citing something Ruth Bader Ginsburg said in 8th grade before she was legally an adult, you know you are not going to do very well with this lawsuit. But, so they filed this lawsuit, and when I last made a video about this, I think, it was about a year ago, or maybe less than a year ago, but the judge in November of last year finally issued a ruling on this case. And he trashed this Louisiana bill. It was gorgeous. I want to show you just a couple of the things that he pointed out here. Let me see if I could find one thing I wanted to find. Here we go. He issued the whole historical revisionism thing that the plaintiffs were saying. This is what he said. Let me see if I can pull this up. Here we go. Why does he keep doing that? Look at this line right here. This is what the judge said, the federal district court judge. In sum, the historical evidence showed that the instances of using the Ten Commandments in public school were too scattered to amount to convincing evidence that it was common at the time of the founding or incorporation of the First Amendment to utilize the Decalogue in public school education. That is, the evidence demonstrates that the practice at issue, putting the Ten Commandments in school, does not fit within and is otherwise not consistent with a broader historical tradition during those time periods, which is legalese for saying, why are these Christians lying to me? And he just smacked it down entirely. He also pointed out that it was absolutely coercive to make kids have to see this. This is what he said later on in this in his ruling. Each of the plaintiff's minor children will be forced in every practical sense, through Louisiana's required attendance policy, to be a captive audience and to participate in a religious exercise, reading and considering a specific version of the Ten Commandments, one posted in every single classroom for the entire school year, regardless of the age of the student or subject matter. So yeah, by forcing kids to have to look at this, you are shoving your religion in their faces. So this judge just completely smacked it down in every possible way he could. And the other thing is that the state of Louisiana said this doesn't violate the First Amendment. And the judge said, what are you talking about? They maintain that they can comply with the Establishment Clause by surrounding the Ten Commandments with non-religious matter, no matter how outlandish that material may be. That is to say, the Attorney General defendants believe they can constantly change their iterations, leaving potential challengers trying to seize and hold the ever-shifting Proteus until Proteus eventually tires. That's a reference to mythology. But basically, no matter how much you want to do, the judge is saying, you want to put posters around it? That doesn't fix the problem here. You want to put a disclaimer with the poster? That doesn't fix any of the problems. And so the judge didn't fall for it. Okay? He was very specific to say there's nothing legal about putting the Christian Ten Commandments, the KJV version, no less, in public schools. That decision by that judge in November struck down the law. It was unconstitutional. And he made that ruling before any school, to my knowledge, ever put up the Ten Commandments in their classrooms to begin with. So that was wonderful news. But where we left off with this bill is that you knew Louisiana was going to appeal. They want this case to go to the Supreme Court. And so the next step is it gets filed with the Appellate Court, and that's what we were waiting on. That's what a bunch of other states, I think last time I did videos, Arkansas just passed a bill to put the Ten Commandments up in public schools. They've already been sued over that. Texas just passed that law like this week. They're about to get sued over that. So what's this appellate court going to do now? And the good news is that this week, the appellate court issued their decision. I know this is weird font, by the way, but this is their decision. This is the ultra-conservative Fifth Circuit. Normally, you don't want anything to go through the Fifth Circuit, but they go, this is a 50-page response where they document everything that is happening. You have these three judges right here who are listening to the case. In case you're wondering, those three were appointed by Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Joe Biden. And guess what? They basically said in their ruling, hey, remember that earlier decision from November? Yeah, it's solid. So everything they said earlier, everything that judge said earlier, we endorse it. So the law is still unconstitutional. And one of the things they point out is that what law are they citing in defense of their ruling here? What they say is that by forcing kids to have to deal with the Ten Commandments every day in school, that's obviously illegal. And it's already identical to another law that the Supreme Court has already said you cannot have. It's called Stone v. Graham. It involves the Ten Commandments in the state of Kentucky. And about 50 years ago, the Supreme Court said that is illegal. And so if you have this law in Louisiana and it's functionally identical to what they did in Kentucky 50 years ago, Well, guess what? Then the Supreme Court precedent says we got to declare the Louisiana law unconstitutional as well. And these judges called bullshit on the claim that putting up the Ten Commandments would help kids understand and appreciate the foundational documents of the state and the national government. The judges pointed out, like, those foundational documents that you want the kids to see, those are optional in your bill, like the Magna Carta and the Declaration of Independence. And also, you don't even have to make them into large posters, so you don't care about it. They said, look, it's not our decision here. The Supreme Court said in Stone v. Graham that 10 Commandments in schools is illegal. We're bound by that, so your law is also unconstitutional. Now, one of the things Louisiana said is, well, remember Justice Kennedy, that football coach, Joe Kennedy in the state of Washington, the guy who wanted to do these showboaty prayers in the middle of the football field after games? The Supreme Court said he's allowed to do that. And in the process of saying he's allowed to do that, they basically got rid of something called the Lemon test, which is the test that lets judges figure out if something violates church-state separation or not. The Kennedy case said the Lemon test is no longer in effect. And what these justices said is it doesn't matter if that law is no longer in effect, because there are plenty of other laws that are in effect, and all of them say the 10 Commandments in school is still illegal. So, pick your poison. If you think the Lemon test doesn't apply anymore, well, we still have the Establishment Clause. We still have this ruling in Stone v. Graham. And until the Supreme Court tells us otherwise, we are bound to follow their precedent. So they said, your Louisiana law is unconstitutional. You cannot put up the 10 Commandments in schools. Now, the obvious question is, okay, well, what happens now? Is Louisiana going to appeal this? And in the one statement that the state has made so far, this is what the Attorney General said. She said, we will continue to pursue the case through the courts. We strongly disagree with the Fifth Circuit's affirmance of an injunction preventing 5 Louisiana parishes from implementing HB 71. And this is important. We will immediately seek relief from the full Fifth Circuit, which is an option. Like, okay, maybe I got unlucky with those 3 judges. I'm going to ask the entire super conservative Fifth Circuit to look at this, and if necessary, the U.S. Supreme Court. And what that means is the state of Louisiana is not done fighting this yet. They really want a court to say that the 10 Commandments have nothing to do with Christianity. It's just part of American history. And so far, none of the judges they have come across are willing to cross that line because they know that's bullshit. And I don't know what happens now. I don't know if the Fifth Circuit wants to take up this case. Usually, if 3 judges unanimously say this thing is dumb and illegal, you really don't need a full circuit court to take a full appellate court to look at anything. It's not like they got to break a tie. This one's pretty obvious. And even the Supreme Court, I got to say, even with this ultra-conservative Supreme Court, they really haven't shown much interest in trying to overturn law in obvious ways to promote Christianity. Like, I know they do it sometimes, but they make arguments like, look, this is an edge case and we're giving it to the Christians. This is not an edge case. This is one of those, it's obviously promoting Christianity and everyone can see that. And the Supreme Court doesn't seem to want to take up cases like this when there's no reason for them to do it. Doesn't mean they're going to say no. Louisiana's going to keep fighting this. But again, if Louisiana ignored legal precedent and they clearly just want to make sure their brand of Christianity gets preferential treatment, it is really hard, even in this legal environment, to find courts that are willing to grant you that premise. Because right now, everyone knows they're bullshitting. So hopefully, the next thing that happens is the full Fifth Circuit says, we are not looking at this case. There's nothing for us to weigh in on here. And hopefully, the Supreme Court, enough of the justices say, yeah, there's nothing for us to deal with here. This is pretty clear cut and simple. You don't need us weighing in on this. That's the ideal situation. And that would basically put an end, for now, to all of these 10 Commandment bills that are going up in Arkansas and Louisiana and Texas. So we'll see.